5-place settings I'd laid that afternoon with my grandmother's silver, and my attorney Thomas Briggs was on the phone saying words like equitable interest and Raleigh Council and their fishing, and all I could think about was that the candles had burned all the way down. Nobody had come. Nobody had even called. And now, 3 days later, the people who couldn't be bothered to drive 20 minutes to celebrate the biggest thing I'd ever done in my life wanted to be on the deed. I sat down on my kitchen floor, still in my work clothes, back against the cabinet, and I started to laugh. Not a good laugh. The kind that comes out of you when the situation is so far past what you can process that your body just picks laughter because it's the only exit available. Then I stopped laughing and started making a folder. Let me tell you about the Galloways, because you need to understand us before you can understand any of what happened. My father, Richard Galloway, is 63 years old and has worked in commercial insurance for 35 years. He is a man who delivers bad news the way a doctor delivers a terminal diagnosis, calmly, slowly, with the clinical detachment of someone who has already decided the outcome. He coached my little league team and never once told me I did well. Not once in 12 years of sports. He called it keeping me hungry. My mother, Carol, is warm in the way that a space heater is warm. Pleasant to stand near until you realize the heat is perfectly calibrated and goes no further than she intends. She runs a small candle business, Carolina Wick and Wax, out of a workshop behind the house. She is beloved in her church community and posts inspirational quotes on Instagram with 6,300 followers. To anyone looking in from outside, she is the ideal Southern mother. My brother Derek is 34, 2 years older than me. Derek is what happens when love becomes a substitute for standards. He is funny and charming and genuinely likable, and he has coasted on those qualities his entire life like a man riding a current he didn't have to earn. 2 failed semesters at NC State, a landscaping business that lasted 11 months, a food truck, a consulting period that lasted 2 years and was never explained to me. Our parents have bankrolled every landing. Me? I'm Ethan. I'm a senior project analyst at a logistics firm in Raleigh. I have a 401k and a gym membership I actually use and a Honda Accord with 74,000 miles on it that I maintain on schedule. I don't say this to make myself sound admirable. I say it because in my family, this made me the reliable background character, the one who didn't need anything, the one who would be fine. They were right that I'd be fine. They were wrong about why. I started saving for a house at 26, not dreaming about it, not Pinterest boarding it, saving. I opened a dedicated account at Truist Bank and I transferred $800 a month into it without touching it, and I did that for 5 years while living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cary with a roommate named Joel, who is still one of my closest friends. When I had $61,000 saved, I called a mortgage lender. Her name was Dana Perkins, 14 years in residential lending, an office in North Raleigh, the kind of professional who makes you feel competent just by treating you like you are. She looked at my credit score, 794, my debt-to-income ratio, clean, and my 5 years of consistent saving, and said, "You're in a very strong position." Those words, "You're in a very strong position." I'd never heard my family say anything like them. We found the house in October. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a front yard with an oak tree that had been there longer than I'd been alive, and a kitchen with casement windows that looked out over a small backyard with enough room for a garden I kept telling myself I'd start. The asking price was $387,000. We got it for $374,500. I put down $62,000, almost everything I had, and closed on November 3rd. I called my parents from the parking lot of the title company. "I signed today," I said. "I'm a homeowner." There was a pause. "Well," my father said, "that's something. That's something." I texted them a photo of the front door, the oak tree in the yard, my key in the lock. My mother replied with a thumbs up emoji. I told myself they were just not demonstrative people. I had been telling myself that for 32 years. It was a comfortable story, and it kept me from having to look at what was underneath it. I planned the housewarming dinner for 3 weeks. Not a party, a dinner, just the family. Intimate, specific, the kind of meal that says this matters and so do you. I drove 40 minutes to a farm stand in Wake Forest for the chicken because I remembered my mother saying once years ago that farm chicken tasted different, and she was right. I made my grandmother's rolls from a recipe card I'd found in her things after she died, her handwriting still perfectly legible in blue ballpoint. I made a lemon tart. I bought silver balloons that spelled home from a party supply store, which cost $14 and took me 20 minutes to tape across the kitchen window, and which I felt briefly embarrassed about before deciding I didn't care. I called each of them, my mother, my father, Derek. "Dinner at my place," I said. "Saturday the 18th, 6:30. We'll be there," my mother said. "Sure," Derek said. My father said, I set 5 places at the table, one for me, one for my mother, one for my father, one for Derek, and one for my grandmother, who had died 2 years before, and who was the only person in my family who ever looked at what I was building and said, clearly and without qualification, "Boy, you're going places." The 5th plate was for her. I know how that sounds. I don't care. At 6:15, I took the chicken out of the oven. At 6:30, I lit the candles. At 7, I called my mother. Voicemail. At 7:12, I texted Derek, "Hey, still coming?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again, then nothing. At 7:50, I called Derek directly. He picked picked up on the third ring and I could hear music in the background, voices, the particular ambient roar of a sports bar. "Oh," he said when I asked where he was. "I figured it got pushed." "Pushed to when?" I asked. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. My thumb was resting on the screen, and I noticed that my hand wasn't shaking. I was surprised by that. I'd expected panic, or hurt, or anger. What I felt was something much quieter and more total, like a door closing very gently in a house you're leaving for the last time. My mother texted at 8:15, "Sorry, something came up. Busy tonight." My father texted at 8:47, "We need to talk about your house." Not, "Congratulations." Not, "I'm sorry we missed it." Not, "Are you okay? We need to talk about your house." I sat at my kitchen table for a while. 5 plates, 4 empty chairs. The balloons were slightly deflated by then, the silver letters going soft. Home. The candles had burned down to about an inch each, wax pooled in the holders, and in a couple of hours they'd gutter out and it would just be me in the dark. I put the chicken in the refrigerator. I covered the rolls with a dish towel. I blew out the candles. I cleared 4 place settings and washed them by hand in the sink. I left the 5th. My father called the next morning at 9. "Your mother and I have been talking," he said, calm, measured, like a man who had rehearsed this. "What you did was a bit much." I let the sentence sit for a moment. "I bought a house," I said, "without discussing it with the family. It's inconsiderate. Your brother has been going through a difficult time. Seeing something like that." "Nobody showed up," I said. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point." He did the exhale. Long, slow, from deep in the chest. The sound of controlled disappointment. A sound I had been responding to my entire life by shrinking, by softening, by finding some way to make myself smaller so the air pressure in the room would equalize. "A man should think about how his decisions affect the people around him," he said. I looked out my kitchen window at the oak tree in the yard. A squirrel was working its way along one of the lower branches with the total focus of an animal that has exactly one job. "Were you happy for me?" I asked. "When I sent that picture, even for a second, were you happy?" 4 seconds of silence. "That's not the point," he said. 4 seconds. That's how long it took him to decide not to answer. I've thought about that a lot since. 4 seconds isn't confusion. That's calculation. "Okay," I said. "Ethan, thanks for calling, Dad." I hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table in my house in the quiet, and I understood something I had been refusing to understand for 32 years. My family did not want me to succeed. They wanted me to strive indefinitely in their direction, needing them, so that when I finally arrived at something, the arrival could be theirs too. Managed, credited, supervised. The moment I succeeded on my own terms, in my own direction, I became a problem to be managed. I went to Lowe's. I bought a cedar board, 6 inches by 18, already smooth, and a wood-burning kit that cost $22. I spent an hour at my kitchen table burning 3 lines into it in block letters, going over each line twice to make sure it was deep enough to read from the street. No family discounts, no family visits, no exceptions. I mounted it on the front gate with 2 stainless screws, took a photo, posted it on my personal Instagram with 1 line of caption, "My house, my rules." I want to be honest about my intentions here. I was not thinking about virality. I was not thinking about strategy. I was a 32-year-old man who had spent the previous evening alone at a table he'd set for people who were at a sports bar, and this was what I had instead of screaming. By noon, it had 11,000 shares. By 3, it had 58,000. By midnight, it had crossed 200,000. I stopped counting after that. The comments came in so fast the app lagged. And the thing that undid me, the thing I was not prepared for, was how many of them said the same thing. My parents didn't come to my graduation either. My family said my promotion was showing off. I spent years chasing people who needed me to fail to feel okay about themselves. You just described my entire childhood in a cedar board. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and I read them for 2 hours. Strangers. Hundreds of thousands of strangers who had felt this exact thing and never had a word for it. And here I was, 32 years old with a wood-burning kit, apparently giving them one. My phone was exploding from a different direction at the same time. "Derek, take it down. You're embarrassing the family." Derek, 15 minutes later. "Mom is crying. You happy now?" My father's voicemail came at 7:14 p.m. His voice was controlled, which was worse than if he'd been angry. Angry would have been emotion. This was policy. "Ethan, this is beneath you. Take that post down tonight, or your mother and I will reconsider our relationship with you." Reconsider our relationship? Because I bought a house. Because I put a sign on my gate. Because I said my rules in the place I paid for. I saved the voicemail to my Google Drive, backed it up to my MacBook, sent a copy to my email. Then I texted my father back 1 sentence. "I'll consider it." I did not take it down. 2 days later, my cousin Lauren emailed me. Lauren is 36, lives in Charlotte, works in HR at a healthcare company. We've always gotten along in the way that cousins get along when they grow up in the same orbit but different gravitational fields. Occasional holidays, sporadic texts, genuine warmth that doesn't require maintenance. She is not a person who emails unless she means it. She said she had things she'd never told me, things she thought I deserved to know, especially now. I read the email 3 times. My parents had quietly given Derek $15,000 3 years ago, a down payment on a condo in Durham. He'd lost the condo inside of 2 years. Lauren didn't know the details, but the money was gone. Nobody told me. Not Derek, not not my parents. They had simply moved funds in one direction while maintaining the performance of a family that treated its children equally. When Derek turned 30, they threw him a surprise dinner at a steakhouse in Cary. Private room, 40 people, open bar. Lauren estimated it cost close to $2,000. I know this because Lauren was there, and I was not invited. I didn't get a dinner when I graduated college. I got a card with a $50 bill inside and a handshake from my father. Then the last paragraph, the one that rearranged something in my chest permanently. About 2 years ago, this would have been before you were under contract on the house. Your mom told my mom that she hoped you wouldn't actually pull it off. She said it would make Derek feel worse about himself if you bought a house before he got back on his feet. I read that sentence 4 times. Then I set my phone face down on my desk and sat very still for a while. My mother had not missed dinner because something came up. She had missed dinner because she didn't want to watch me win. She had been hoping, out loud, to another person, that I would fail. There is a specific kind of grief for a thing you never actually had. I don't know what it's called. I know what it feels like. It feels like opening a box you've been carrying for 30 years and finding it empty, and the grief isn't for what was taken. It's for the weight you put in yourself so the box wouldn't feel hollow. I went for a run, 4 miles. Then I came home and called my attorney. Thomas Briggs has been my attorney for 4 years. He handled my closing, my lease review before that, a minor employment dispute in 2021, 14 years of practice, mid-40s. The kind of lawyer who speaks slowly because he's always thinking faster than he's talking. I need to ask you something, I said. Ask. The email from my cousin. Can I use it? With her permission, yes. What are you considering? A reporter reached out yesterday. Someone at the News and Observer. Pause. What do they want? The whole story. The sign, the dinner, the voicemail. Ethan, that's a significant step. I know. Once it's out, it's out. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Let me know what you decide, and send me the voicemail file before you do anything. I called the reporter back. Her name was Janet Odom, 8 years at the News and Observer, a beat covering family and social trends, the kind of journalist who asks questions that are actually statements with question marks on the end. She had found me through the viral post. She wanted to understand what had happened. I told her everything. The dinner, the empty chairs, the texts, my father's voicemail, Lauren's email with Lauren's explicit permission, which I had confirmed by phone that morning. Do you have documentation? She asked. I opened the folder on my desktop. How much do you need? The article ran on Thursday. He bought his dream home. His family didn't show up. It didn't go viral. It detonated. Within 6 hours, it was the most shared piece on the NNO site. By Friday morning, it had been picked up by 3 national outlets. My inbox had 4,400 unread emails by Saturday, which I know because I opened it once, looked at that number, and closed it again. My phone rang that Saturday morning at 8:52. Thomas Briggs. Ethan, he said, I need to ask you something. Has anyone in your family made any recent inquiries about your property? My stomach went cold. What kind of inquiries? I got a call this morning from an attorney in Raleigh. Firm I know, real estate and family law. He represents your parents. He's asking whether family funds were used in the purchase of the property, whether there are grounds for an equitable interest claim. I was standing in my kitchen. The casement windows, the white oak floors, the oak tree in the yard, everything I had spent 5 years and $62,000 building toward. They didn't give me a single dollar, I said. I know. Your file is clean, Ethan. I closed the transaction myself, but they're going to claim they provided financial support over the years, contributions to your upbringing, gifts, things that could be characterized as Thomas. An expectation of return. Thomas. Yes. I have 10 years of bank statements. Every direct deposit, every transfer, every bonus I saved, not $1 from them. Silence for a moment. Get me that file. I spent 4 hours on Saturday organizing a decade of financial records into a folder that I then converted to PDF and emailed to Thomas at 2:17 p.m. Then I called Janet Odom. They tried to take the house, I said. Silence on her end. A long one. Are you willing to go on record? Yes. The second article hit Monday morning. Family of viral homeowner attempts legal claim on property he built alone. The opposing attorney, a man named Gerald Puckett, 12 years in practice, who I later learned had called Thomas somewhat apologetically before withdrawing, dropped my parents as clients within a week. Thomas told me later that the documentation made the case unpursuable in any court that had read the articles, and that Puckett was not a man who liked unpursuable cases. They went fishing, Thomas said. They thought the publicity would pressure you into a settlement. They've never understood me, I said. No, he said. They clearly have not. The fallout was specific, and I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing watching it. My mother's candle business, Carolina Wick and Wax, 6,300 Instagram followers, boutiques in Raleigh and Chapel Hill and Asheville, collapsed inside 3 weeks. Not from anything I did, from the attention. People found her page, people left comments, boutiques quietly stopped ordering. She posted 3 times in that period. An affirmation quote, a photo of a candle called forgiveness, and then nothing. The Instagram went private. When I checked the business registration with the NC Secretary of State 6 weeks later, it had been dissolved. Derek called me at 1:08 a.m. on a Wednesday, drunk enough that I almost didn't recognize his voice at first. It had gone soft and cracked at the edges, in a way I'd only ever heard from him once before, when our grandmother died. You ruined everything, he said. I stopped pretending, I said. You blew up the whole family over a dinner. No, I said. said, and I was very calm, which I think surprised him. I exposed a family that hoped I'd fail. The dinner was just when I found out. There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing. That's not fair, he said finally, but his voice was quiet when he said it, not angry. Quiet in the way people get when they're arguing with something they know is true. I know about the $15,000, I said. He didn't answer. And the birthday dinner. I know about that too. Still nothing. I'm not calling to fight you, Derek. I'm telling you I know, so we can stop performing a version of this family that doesn't exist. The line was quiet for a long time. I didn't know what they said to you, he finally said. About the house. I didn't know Mom said that. I believed him. That's the strange thing. I actually believed him. Derek's failures have always been failures of effort, not of character. He's a man who has been handed things for so long he no longer knows how to reach for them. That's its own kind of damage. Get some sleep, I said. I hung up. Sat in the dark in my bedroom in my house, which was mine, which no one could take, which I had built slowly and quietly over 5 years while no one in my family noticed. 3 weeks after the second article, a handwritten envelope appeared in my mailbox. My father's handwriting, controlled and upright, the kind of penmanship from an era when people were taught that how you wrote reflected on your character. 2 pages. I'm not going to quote it in full, but I'll tell you what it contained because it matters. There were fragments of apology, not a full one, not the kind that takes responsibility cleanly and without qualifications, but fragments, careful admissions, the acknowledgement that the dinner should not have been missed, that the voicemail was wrong, that the legal inquiry was a mistake that he regretted, and then the last 4 words of the letter, which came at the end of a sentence that I could tell had been rewritten several times. You could see the pressure variations in the ink where he'd gone back over it. The full sentence was, I know you think I've never been proud of you. I always have been. I always have been. I folded the letter in half, then in half again. I put it in the kitchen drawer, the junk drawer, next to the takeout menus and the spare batteries and the little cedar-scented sachet my grandmother had given me years ago that had long since lost its smell. I never wrote back, not because I'm cruel, not because I wanted to punish him, because I spent 32 years waiting for those 4 words, and they came in a handwritten letter after a lawyer dropped his case, and his wife's business collapsed, and his youngest son's story had been read by 2 million people, and I sat with them for a long time, turning them over, trying to find the weight I'd always imagined they would have. They were lighter than I expected. That's the thing nobody tells you about vindication. You think it will feel like getting something. It mostly feels like finally being allowed to put something down. That oak tree in my front yard dropped its leaves in November and came back green in March. I watched it happen from the casement windows in my kitchen while I drank coffee in the mornings. I did not start the garden because I am not yet a person who gardens, but I bought a chair for the backyard in April, and I sit in it on weekend evenings and read, and sometimes I do nothing at all, and that particular kind of nothing, unearned, unobligated, unbothered, is the closest thing I've found to what I was actually building toward all those years. Joel came over for dinner in the spring. We ate at the kitchen table. He said the rolls were the best thing he'd ever had and asked for the recipe, and I wrote it out on a note card for him. My grandmother's handwriting translated into mine. I put a small plant in the window. I left the 5th place setting in the cabinet because I still think about her, and because I believe she would have come. My father said I'd embarrass the family with a sign on my gate. He was right. But embarrass is a funny word for what actually happened, because when the dust settled, the only things that were embarrassed were the things that had always been there, finally seen. The empty chairs, the voicemail, the $15,000, the dinner they threw for Derek, and the card they sent me. The sentence my mother said out loud to another person, that she hoped I'd fail. I didn't expose my family. I just stopped covering for them. And it turns out that when you stop, the light comes in all on its own.